their, I guess, like end of their day. I have had a super, super busy day. I feel like I'm like, whoa, we're back in the webinar again. The day went by so fast. So what I will do is I will kind of skip over. Hello, welcome to some new faces. Good evening. And hello to our beautiful familiar faces, of course. So I will let you guys sort of dive into the Q&A and anything you sort of want to post in there. For anybody who is new and you're wondering how this works, all you have to do is if you hover your mouse over the bottom, you'll see a little chat box and you can click on it and then you can submit your questions in the chat there. And that is how your questions can get answered. And then in terms of announcements, we don't have too many announcements where you're going to see some really cool updates over the next little while to your dashboard, to our courses page. One cool thing that will happen soon is their team's working very hard on in the background is a feature when you come in where like if you want to just take a little quiz for what you want to work on next, like what you're struggling through in your life, these sorts of things, we'll be able to answer questions and it will actually suggest certain courses for you. It'll be like a little smart quiz. We have this really cool technical team in here now that's doing all these amazing things. And then we are just about full for anybody who wanted to do the IAT training. Will probably be filled, I would imagine, at the pace that we're going at by like Monday or Tuesday. Which is a little earlier than we expected because obviously the event's not till July. That's for the recorded one, but for the live one, if you are unable to make it in time, you're always welcome to join the recorded version. You still get access to the webinars, and I am considering trying to do like a second training this year. We were going to wait till next year, but just based on the amount of people that are requesting it, we may end up doing that as well. So anyways, that's pretty much all my announcements. You'll see a new attachment style webinar quiz in the next couple of days as well. And the first question I have here is from Emily. Hi, Emily. How are you? Nice to see you. So Emily says, hi, Thais. I've been having a difficult time at work. I've been at my job for just under 3 years and still get asked to do very mundane tasks. My manager will ask me questions that I have already answered for them several times because they forget. They have me do things that are their responsibility and not under my job description, and they treat me like a secretary, changing font sizes, taking meeting minutes, mundane tasks. This makes me feel less than, unseen, disrespected, and undervalued, where I am emotionally unsettled the rest of the day. I really don't like when people tell me what to do, maybe an only child thing, let alone when it's not even my job to do, but I'd like to lessen the intensity of all of this so it doesn't take control over my entire day. Please help. Thank you so much. Okay, amazing question. So much of the time when we have stuff like this that shows up, it's like a meaning issue, right? As if like it's our subconscious mind giving a situation meaning. And then we give the situation meaning, we feel uncomfortable about the meaning that's being given to the situation, and we kind of are like triggering ourselves at a subconscious level. However, in this case, I would say this is an unmet needs challenge, right? Where it's really related to like unmet needs. I mean, you can check in with both. You can do like an emotional processing sheet on it because it's going to like give you an output that's like very valuable and clear after the fact. But usually it's going to start off with like, okay, so what am I making this mean about myself? And it's like, okay, I'm making this mean that I'm not good enough. I'm unworthy. I don't matter. I'm not important. Something like that. I'm disrespected. But I hear in your question, and then you want to work on that, right? But then I hear in your question that it's so much more related to an unmet needs thing. And it's like, okay, so what do you need in order to feel relief? And it's like, do I need more challenge in my workplace? Do I need more novelty? Do I need better boundaries with my boss so that I'm not constantly taking on things that are their responsibility? And I would write out a list of needs. And especially because you've been there for 3 years, I would also say like, hey, take some time as well and ask yourself, what would truly make me happy and what's missing from my career? It's almost like getting in a relationship and then just kind of being on autopilot for 3 years and then feeling like, okay, wait, did I ever consider, and maybe you're doing this already and it's just not in your question. That's obviously possible as well. But I would look at like, what are the things that are missing from my career? What are the things that I need to feel more fulfilled? What's my plan? Like, should I make a plan to like leave over the next 6 months and slowly start looking for different jobs, maybe take some kind of like course in the meantime to upgrade myself and then pivot? Like, what can you do that will really help you feel like you're in a position where you can get more fulfillment? Or perhaps it's just more fulfillment from the current role you're in. Maybe it's like, or not even a role, but just the company you're working with. Maybe it's asking for a raise, a promotion, something kind of new. And usually the more you're like able to communicate your boundaries, communicate your needs, see them through, the less you'll feel like, oh my gosh, there's all these unmet needs. My boundaries are being violated, things that I feel unfulfilled about, I'm being forced to do. And sometimes too, it can be like, in terms of the meaning, it can also be like a out of control wound. Like, I just feel like I'm out of control. People are telling me what to do. They're controlling what I do. And that can feel really uncomfortable as well. So I would start with an emotional processing sheet. I would equilibrate the stories. I would identify what the unmet needs are, then take some like serious action steps towards showing up for those needs so that you can allow yourself to feel fulfillment in your career long term. I really think career fulfillment is such an important thing because we spend so much time there. You know, it's not like career fulfillment is something where, hey, you know, we have to sit around for a little bit and we spend 10 hours, you know, throughout the week there. It's like 40 hours of your waking life. And for a lot of people, it's 50. And then that doesn't even include like the amount of time you spend thinking about it when you're not working, the amount of time you spend getting ready for work, going to work through transportation, coming back from work through transportation. It's like, so we have 168 hours in a week, right? The average person spends about like 56 of those hours sleeping if you sleep 7 hours a night. And it's like, so if you look at that, like, let's just round that up to 60 hours. You only have like 108 hours for your whole week. And if like 50, 60 of those hours are spent like going to work, getting ready for work, coming from home from work, thinking about work, transportation to work, and then the other time is spent like just doing normal things to keep your life okay, like cooking, cleaning, you know, getting gas, like doing things that are normally there for your household, you have very limited time. Like the vast majority of your life is taken up for in terms of your waking life. And it's like, you know, so how do we position ourselves so that we're able to recognize that it's a huge commitment working, and it's totally normal to feel really not happy and not good if you're not happy with what you're doing. It's normal for that to affect us. And what we want to be able to do in the Mindset Mastery and Life Mapping course, if you're looking to make a career change or do something different, it actually helps you like make a plan and then reverse engineer those steps. It's a really great resource for that as well, in the school. And it's just, I think it's a really important part of our lives to take accountability for, because if you're really unhappy at work, it's going to be a lot more difficult to be like decently happy in life overall, because it takes up so much space. And we can do like mindfulness activities at work. We can do like thought reprogramming at work and things to sort of like take the edge off. But it's really important that in our work relationships and our working life, the activities we're taking on, that we're fulfilled there, because that will translate to like how you come home from work, how you treat your family, your spouse, your partner on the weekends, like whatever it might be, it will translate because it's going to spill over into your attitude for the whole day. So very, very important. And great question. Okay. The next question I have here is from AA. Hello, AA. How are you this evening? So AA says, hi, Thais. Can you explain the DA male's relationship to money? Is there anything significant there? I have found that the DA males I've dated tend to be successful and financially stable and well off, but frugal. Definitely a pattern. Truth. Is it everybody's truth? No. Is it a pattern? Yes. And here's why. And it's actually really important to pay attention to. A couple things, okay? Number one, if you feel as a person like you have to fend for yourself in the world, then and if you believe that everybody's out to fend for themselves, you're not going to be generous, because your literal like belief operating system says, well, everybody's out for themselves. And so I'm going to be frugal when it comes to like not being generous towards other people. Now that's kind of in our relationship to other people. What about when it's like the person themselves? Well, a lot of DAs grow up in a tremendous amount of lack. When you're a child, you don't have a relationship to money, right? What's your currency as a child? Your currency is like emotional energy that you're getting from your family members. And because so many DAs are neglected, their nervous system operates from a state of lack, right? It's like they don't get they're lacking the attunement that they need. They're lacking the emotional connection. They're lacking feeling seen, feeling heard. As a child, when you don't have attunement, and I want you to imagine this for just a moment. Imagine you come into the world. Okay, let's pretend you're an adult now, and you suddenly pop into another world and you're surrounded by a whole bunch of like creatures. You don't speak their language and you can't fend for yourself. So you are just in this theoretical world. You only know that the people who are taking care of you, the strange creatures that are taking care of you, are going to take care of you based on if they actually show up and give you like nice emotional energy. And because you don't speak their language, they're not like, oh, don't worry, I'll take care of you. And it computes. You don't understand that. So in theory, like, how are you judging your survival? It's kind of off of like the attunement. Do I have somebody caring for me? Are they kind to me? Do they come towards me when I have a need? Do they meet my needs regularly? Are they showing up for me consistently? This all creates a feeling of safety. When that's absent because a caregiver is neglectful, there's no like operating system for a child to be like, oh, I'm going to be safe. The child doesn't like intuitively know they're going to be safe. They read that from the amount of attunement they get from their caregivers. So at a very young age, neglect creates belief imprints of I am unsafe. And if I feel like I'm unsafe, and if I feel like I'm out for myself, and if I'm coming from a state of lack because I'm not getting my needs buckets filled around like emotional energy care, those are some of my earliest like operating imprints. And that means that until I like really deeply reprogram those things, I'm going to be operating that way for a long period of time. And we also see that dismissive avoidance tend to be more in sympathetic nervous system than other attachment styles on a regular basis, more pervasively, right? And so they're kind of more in like fight or flight. They can be a little more like anxious, although they tend to deal with their anxiety well. And so all of these things are like creating an output of being frugal, because it's like, well, if I save all my money and I hoard all of my things, then that makes me feel safer. That makes me feel like I have more control. That's my way of like trying to not be in lack. But lack is a mentality, right? You can have somebody who's a billionaire and is still in the mentality of lack, right? And so you may see the frugalness there. And then you can have somebody who doesn't have a ton of money, but is truly abundant, right? And so it's like, we can have this sort of operating state, but this is usually what it's coming from, and what it's rooted in at a deeper level is those three main areas of feeling unsafe, having a subconscious comfort zone around feeling like they're in lack, and then also having this belief system that everybody's kind of out for themselves. So great question and very interesting observation. Okay, the next question I see here is from FS. Hello, FS. How are you? So FS says, I'm FA, 45, and had a good childhood. We were poor, but my mom gave me everything, nothing to herself. She sounds BPD, anxious, depressed, and ADHD. She doesn't allow for boundaries, gets angry, and crosses them constantly. For example, dad reaches for bread. She intersects, no bread for you, not allowing it. I only started creating boundaries the past 5 years and have constantly have to cut her off weeks at a time. She follows the rules for a while, slowly inching in until they are X'd. Boundaries equal not cleaning / organizing my house, grandparenting, telling me what to do. She talks nonstop, one subject to the next, plays the victim, known at the emergency room, I think by name, rarely looks me in the eyes while at my house doing the stuff I don't need her to do, and never leaves. Question, why do I feel trapped around her? She asks me a question and I want to run. Today I realize I feel trapped when she starts talking. I almost want to not see her, but it's a reaction to lack of boundaries, and will feel the guilt when she passes. Okay, so there's a lot of really important stuff in here. And I'm not sure how long you've been in the school, but you're going to see a lot of these patterns really, really well explained. So first of all, thank you for sharing. And thank you for your vulnerability. You had a good childhood, I'm sure, in so many ways, but there's some big challenges in here too. Like if you have a parent who, first of all, you can almost guarantee that there's some codependency and enmeshments in your parent child. I know you're not a child, you're in your adult life, but like that parent-child dynamic, you'll see that there's like boundarylessness, codependency. You're taught that like we are responsible for each other, a little bit of invasiveness, a lot of these different dynamics, right? And I also hear that she kind of like plays the victim, which kind of puts you as the caretaker. One of the most important things when you go through a childhood with some of these patterns is you have to be able to learn. It's one of the most important life lessons out of this childhood. Learn to make decisions not from the fear of guilt, but from the love of truth. Okay. So one thing that you'll learn coming out of codependency is it's very easy to continuously make a decision and be like, oh, I need space. And then be like, oh no, I'm going to feel guilty about needing space. So I'm not going to need space. And sometimes the pain of guilt, when it's stored there subconsciously, can be so challenging and so strong that we prioritize not feeling guilt, but in the essence of doing that, we give up our own boundaries, our own needs, and our own relationship to our sense of self. And so this is not me saying like, just cut her out or anything like that, but that is me saying, you're saying, I want to not see her, But I know it's a reaction to a lack of boundaries, and I'll feel the guilt when she passes. And you're saying like, I'm prioritizing avoiding guilt over like living as a human being in my truth. And what you're doing literally is repressing yourself as a strategy to avoid guilt. So just seeing that first, and it's very normal. This is something I had to work on as a person, for different reasons. And it's usually anybody who comes from some sort of codependent or enmeshed family dynamic has to work on in general. So that's number one. I'm going to tell you what to do about that in a moment. Number two is, you're like, why do I feel trapped around her, is your question. Because when we have our boundaries constantly violated, and when we feel like we can't speak up, as a child, our subconscious associations that we are trapped, right? Because as a child, if you have a trapping caregiver, if you have a caregiver who violates your boundaries, doesn't let you do what you want to do, doesn't see and hear your needs, tells you what to do, kind of controls the situation, you're trapped, right? It's not like you can just leave and move out at 8 years old and go rent your own apartment and take it easy and get a break. Like it's not, right? So a lot of times there is a certain degree of trapping in the sense that takes place, even if we have the most loving caregiver with the best intentions, that just has some unhealthy patterns in them that were also passed down to them through trauma. So just really noticing that is important. And what you want to be able to do here is you want to do work on reprogramming the core wound, I am trapped. It's going to be really important, and seeing how you are free. Doing the belief reprogramming and auto suggestion will be very valuable as step one. Step two, you're going to have to become an expert at your boundaries. Whenever we have a codependent family member, when we are like, hey, I want to have a relationship with them, sometimes we can get into polarized thinking, especially FS, because you mentioned you're an FA. It's easy to think in like all or nothing patterns. I either have a relationship with her or I run away. And it can be so extremely like polarized. The reality is that this is just going to be somebody who you probably love very, very much, who probably loves you very, very much. But because of this person's own trauma that's incidentally being passed on to you a little bit, because trauma tends to get passed down, you have to become an expert at having healthy boundaries in order to have a thriving relationship with this person. And this means you might get them slowly inched, but you have to pause that conversation and say, hey, I know you mean really well. I know that you don't mean to be invading my boundaries, but this is a really strong boundary for me. And every time you don't hear me out and you don't respect the boundary, it makes me want to take space. And I don't want to feel like that towards you. So I need you to see this boundary. I need you to understand why it's important to me. And it's not about me wanting space because I don't think you're a good enough parent. It's not about me wanting space because I don't love you or I'm going to abandon you. It's literally just about that I need my own time to do my own thing sometimes. So you can invalidate some of her core wounds. You can hear her core wounds in the way you describe her, like fear of abandonment, fear of not being good enough as well, probably feeling unworthy or unloved. And so you see her like trying to earn love by like cleaning and organizing when you're not asking for her to, or you said cleaning and organizing my house in capital letters, or the need to like not be abandoned by never leaving your house when she comes around, like these sorts of things. And so super normal to feel trapped. Doesn't mean that you don't adore this person in your life. Doesn't mean that you don't have so much love for her. So don't guilt yourself about that. Okay. And so in steps, step one, do reprogramming around the I am trapped core wound. Step two, practice setting boundaries. Go through the boundaries course, get really good at boundaries, do any reprogramming around your fear of setting boundaries. Oh, if I set boundaries, I am bad, I'm mean, I'm, whatever beliefs we have that may be directing that behavioral output. And then step three, I would work through the very last module in the guilt and shame course. It's a 5-step process that will help you reprogram chronic guilt so that you can learn to make decisions in your life, not from a place of guilt, but from a place of truth. And then you can have the conversation to help get rid of any extra guilt that may be there after you communicate something. So if you say, hey, I do need space, you can articulate that and deliver that in a kind way that doesn't have to make the other person feel bad. But that will come with working through guilt first and practicing communicating and getting good at boundaries in that midpoint there as well. So really great question. And thank you for sharing. Okay. The next question I see here is HH. Hello, HH. How are you this evening? So HH says, hello, Thais. I met up with a DA friend I haven't seen in months. We had a great time. She opened up and was very vulnerable with me, even cried in front of me. After that, I acknowledged and thanked her for being so vulnerable and sharing her story. She said it's because she trusts me and feels safe with me. My ex also said she feels safe with me or around me. So does my mom. Some PDS friends and a coworker say that too. I feel grateful, and I notice how much I enjoy hearing people I care about trust me and feel safe around me. It warms my heart center knowing and hearing that. My question is, what needs does knowing people trust me and feel safe with me fulfill? It's really beautiful. Probably the biggest one by far is emotional connection, because there's a certain degree for like true emotional connection of like depth that has to be there, right? It's like if somebody truly trusts me and feels open with me, then they feel connected to me. We can have deeper conversations. We can share things more with each other. So that can be very beautiful. Another one can just be the need for service. Like one of our 6 basic human needs is contribution. And I think sometimes when you're somebody who is very emotionally aware and very empathetic and cares about people, and then you hear that like that can be sometimes a rare thing that people feel, is to feel like they can really trust you and really open up. And then to know that you can provide that to people can just meet a huge need for contribution that we have deep down, to know that like, hey, we're being of service to somebody else's life. We're able to show up and feel that. And it can just feel really rewarding. We are wired that way at a 6 basic human needs level. So there can be those dynamics in a more like, I don't want to say superficial form, because it's not like superficial, but just in another form that's like more surface level than these deep ones, right? Emotional connection, contribution. Sometimes it can also be like the need to feel important, and to feel like, you know, I'm significant, right? Like, oh, I'm helping somebody in some way, or people feel comfortable around me, and it can feel nice to feel needed. And there's nothing wrong with that either. That's like a normal human response. So I would guess that those are the 3 major ones. I would guess that the first 2 are a little bit more deep. And then also sometimes it can make you feel like you can trust other people as well. Like, oh, I'm building a bond with them at a deeper level. And so I feel safer with them as well, knowing that they feel really comfortable around me. And even like connected to that can be like the growth of a relationship. But again, I would say those are like more distant. And the biggest 2 and probably top 3 would likely be emotional connection, significance at more of that sort of superficial level, and then that contribution need that can be quite strong. So really, really great question. And thank you for sharing. Okay. So the next question I see here says, in the beginning here, it says warning, violence trigger. So I'm just going to preface by saying that. And if anybody feels uncomfortable or doesn't want to hear anything like this, you can take a pause or anything like that. And thank you, Anonymous, for letting us know in advance. So Anonymous says, hi, Thais. Warning, violence trigger. How can I heal from a memory that is very vague, but something my mother has related and I vaguely remember part of it? I was probably 7 and we lived on a farm, and my dad had a shotgun and said he was going to kill us. So we hid down the driveway that had lots of mature trees. I can only remember being in the trees part, but it's very hazy. It makes me feel very teary-eyed and tight in the throat when I think of it. How can I process it? Even though it's vague, I have a strong feeling in my body that I am experiencing, and it feels that strong. Thank you. Much love, Thais. Okay. Thank you for sharing this. First of all, I'm so sorry to hear this. I mean, like at 7 years old. So let me give you a breakdown, and then I'm going to tell you what you can do. So at any age, that's super traumatic, right? That's terrifying. Imagine if in our adult life we had an experience like that. It would be a real trauma, right? And at a childhood age, it's that much more terrifying. And it is that much more because we're kind of helpless at that age. And usually around the age of 7, even if we can't remember something properly, our unconscious mind remembers. And it seems like parts of your subconscious are remembering because you have like this hazy sort of component of it. Now, a couple things. The first thing I would say is like, how strong is this trauma? Because sometimes when we're doing post-traumatic growth work, so there's a really good way out of this, first and foremost. I'll actually give you 2 ways out. One is a way out that's protecting you from having to go retrieve the memory or get too close to the memory that still works. And another one may kind of reach a little deeper into the depths of your unconscious rather than just your subconscious. So it may have a slightly stronger impact in a shifting way. But you may want to do this with a therapist or somebody present because this is a pretty severe trauma. So the first thing is, the first one would be when you notice the emotions that come up in your body now, starting by being present with them and just noticing the first thing, which is that these are just sensations. They're super uncomfortable sensations, but that memory is in the past. Nobody can hurt you right now. You're completely safe. And at worst, all you can experience is sensations in your body that are uncomfortable. And you can sit with those sensations for a moment, and you can notice what sensations they are and label them to yourself, and notice that it's probably like a tightness in your throat, or sort of a ball in your throat, and some pressure, probably a little bit of pressure behind your eyes when you feel that need to kind of cry. Maybe like a bit of a tightness in your chest a little bit as well, and maybe some butterflies in your stomach. And just notice, like, at worst, you are here, you're safe, and you're just feeling sensations in your body. And then when you take a moment to sort of sit with them, you can proceed to ask yourself, so what are the emotions connected to these sensations? Like, what emotions are these? Usually they're like sadness, probably a little bit of helplessness or powerlessness, probably a good bit of fear. And you can ask yourself, like, when I feel these emotions, like, what am I making this situation mean? And oftentimes it's like, I am helpless, I am powerless. Probably there's a really painful one in there. That's I am unloved. And usually that's when we have a really unstable caregiver who is going through a big personal problem or challenge. And then there's a huge disconnect that takes place. And it's really easy to feel like, oh my gosh, I'm unloved at that point in time. And a lot of the time, the reality is the caregiver often does love, and they're just fractured inside themselves, right? There's a lot of trauma going on inside of that person. Or they've got a lot of really difficult programming and trauma themselves, to the point where they love, but that love always passes through a filter of dysfunction that can be really extreme at times. And obviously in this case, you're seeing some of these really big patterns. And so you would notice that, like, these are the things that got imprinted on you, right? Probably feeling like unloved, unsafe, helpless, powerless. And those are going to be, and maybe even like a little bit of I am trapped, but I would say those are going to be some of the big ones. And maybe like I am betrayed as well, or I can't trust. And what I would do is I would take those imprints and I would really work on those things, because the unfortunate trauma is that you ever had to go through that at all. And even more unfortunate than that is that since 7 years old, those wounds have probably been affecting you in some form on quite a regular basis. And it's like, hey, it was already enough to go through that once. We shouldn't have to keep reliving these traumatic wounds over and over again. And so it's a really beautiful time to be like, okay, I see these things now. I'm bringing them to the conscious surface, and I have the power in my hands to be able to reprogram these things and shed that and set that to rest, and understand that I am not an unlovable person because this traumatic thing happened. I am not unsafe on a daily basis because that traumatic thing happened. So what you would do is you would do some core wound reprogramming around that. And that would be really, really important. And then what you would also do is you would look at, what did I need in that situation that I didn't have access to? I probably needed safety, clarity, love, reassurance, and try to notice those things. And then part of healing from that trauma is to become an expert at giving those things in the relationship to yourself. Become an expert at, like, being able to show up in the relationship to yourself, give yourself love, give yourself reassurance in your internal dialogue, make yourself feel safe by setting good boundaries in your life, like a lot of these different things. So we could go on for a while here about this stuff, but really, if you want to do a deep dive into it, it's going to be at a higher level without going into the memory. Somatic processing course combined with the emotional mastery course. Those two courses are going to really help you work through some of this stuff. And if you want to go really deep and you want to try to surface the memory and bring some of this stuff up, there is a way we can retrieve things without being in a state of hypnosis or anything. That's pretty laid out in the post-traumatic growth course. But I would suggest, if it's a really traumatic memory, in case like you feel too panicked or it's a lot to deal with, I would suggest like going through the post-traumatic growth course, watching it, understanding the principles, and then having a conversation specifically, even if it's just a one-off session, with a therapist who can guide you through those principles in a one-to-one session. So you can really like go in, you'll probably remember more of those parts of the memory, and be able to really move through it and set it to rest in that way. But again, it's not necessary and you don't have to. And even if you just have the vague memory and you do somatic processing and emotional mastery work, that will be very powerful at helping you move through that and really leave that behind. So I'm so sorry that you had to go through that. It must have been a very scary experience, but it's beautiful that you're here and you're like showing up for yourself and giving yourself the opportunity to like heal and be there for you and your feelings and share these things and be vulnerable and move through them. It takes a lot of courage. So congratulations for doing that. Okay, the next question I see here is from Jamie. Hi, Jamie, how are you? So Jamie says, hi, Thais. I'm hoping you can help with the situation and also label it so that I can identify it and work on it. I just learned that my boyfriend may be moving in with his friend and his friend's wife. When I found out, I was triggered a 9 out of 10. I wouldn't feel comfortable with him living with another female. But to be honest, I would be just as triggered if you were talking about moving in with just other guys and no female were involved. I was so triggered that I thought about maybe breaking off our 1.5-year relationship. I know the more triggered I am, the more painful stories I'm having. But the only stories I have identified here are he will have lots of opportunities to cheat and he will be around a lot of drinking. Why am I so incredibly triggered? Is this my anxious attachment, control issues, codependency? And do I have a say in his living situation? This feels like an elevated level of trigger that I feel when he spends time with friends. How can I have done so much growth and still be triggered by such seemingly small events? Okay. I love this question. Thank you for laying it all out too. It makes it really easy to like move through it. Okay. So first thing, this is a small event. Is it true? Because it doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter how seemingly small the event is. The level of trigger is not related to our objective external experience. It's related to our subjective internal experience 100% of the time. So when you feel like this big triggering event, it doesn't mean, oh, it's a small event and oh, he's just moving in with somebody. It's what it's connected to for you on the inside that's having the impact. So what you can ask yourself is, and you were super on the right track, what do I make this mean? And so you have like, he'll have opportunities to cheat and you have, he will be around a lot of drinking. So you found your story. Amazing. In the Emotional Master Course, in like the second exercise, there's it's like a thought ladder and it's like a cognitive behavioral therapy thing. And you can go through and you can ask yourself, what do I make that mean or why is that bad? And when you keep asking, you'll eventually find a core wound. So we're going to do it together. And I'm going to guess what you're going to say. Okay. So he will have lots of opportunities to cheat. What does that mean or why is that bad? Well, if somebody cheats, what does that mean or why is that bad? Well, I am betrayed, okay, which is a core wound related to trust. So you've got betrayed. That's a pretty obvious one. But also sometimes he'll have lots of opportunities to cheat will also be things like, and if someone cheats, then I am unworthy. I never mattered to that person if they cheated on me. So it can be like, I am unworthy. I don't matter. If somebody cheats, maybe they'll find that person more interesting and they'll leave me. I'll be abandoned, right? So you've got, it just looks like, oh, he'll have opportunities to cheat, but that your meaning is probably like betrayed, abandoned, unworthy, unloved, even if somebody cheats. So now you can start seeing like, wow, it may seem like a small thing on the surface, but it's connected to these really deep, horrible, and remember this, right? When you have this emotional output, everything that's happened or that's being triggered in the moment that it's triggered, whether it's just beliefs that produce the emotional output or whether it's actual thoughts you're having producing the emotional output or a combination of both, in that moment, you are living in the reality. Your subconscious mind isn't like, oh, maybe this will happen. There's a 40% chance, and so I'll only be 40% upset. Like your subconscious doesn't weigh stuff like that. If it believes something and it's activated, you're now living in the world in that moment where this is your truth. So you see him tell you, oh, I'm going to maybe be living with so-and-so. And when those beliefs are activated, now in that moment where you're feeling those feelings, you're believing at a subconscious level, which is taking over your reality in that experience, that here he is. Here's my 1.5-year relationship partner, and he doesn't love me. He's about to betray me. I'm going to be abandoned and I'm not good enough or whatever else is in there, right? So that's your reality. So that's why you're like, oh, I'm considering breaking up, because you are feeling in that moment as if those things are there. Just to be clear, I would look into, Jamie, I'm not sure, but usually those really strong things can be related to more fearful avoidance programming. So just check in and see. Sometimes people think they're anxious at first and then they find out later that they're more FA. So that can be in there, usually an anxious, and you can check in here and see. But the anxious mind tends to go as a pattern Um, Maybe he'll have lots of opportunities to cheat, or he'll be around a lot of drinking, but more like he may meet other people and find me less interesting. He may be more interested in spending time with them. I am excluded. Like I'll hear more of that, like abandonment, exclusion wounds will be stronger, but yours seem to be a lot around like distrust, betrayal. So I mean, APs have those too, but just not as strongly. And yours is really strong because it was 9 out of 10, you said. So I would check in with that. And then what you want to do is you want to equilibrate those stories. You want to like do some reprogramming on those core wounds. You want to question those stories and find equilibrating pieces of evidence. Like, why will he not cheat? Why will he be loyal and faithful? Why does he love me? Why is he why is he trustworthy? What has he shown? And like all those different things. So that's what I would start with, doing that internal work first. Once you do some of that internal work, the next thing is, do you have say in his living situation? I wouldn't say too much. I would say you have say in how his living situation affects you. Okay. So you have say in like your part in that, which is something like this. And this is what I would recommend saying to him. I would say, hey, I want to be vulnerable and share something with you. It's not the easiest thing for me to share, but I noticed when you said that you were moving in with this couple that I felt really triggered. I felt really uncomfortable. It's something I'm working on. And it brought a lot of stuff to my awareness. And I noticed that I felt like insecure. And some of the things that came up were like fearing like, oh, you'll have more opportunities to cheat, or you'll be drinking more often, or around people drinking more often. And to me, that brought up feelings of like being betrayed or abandoned, or, not loved, or things like this. And I want to respect your living situation and what you're choosing to do. But it would really help me if you could include me and just take me into consideration a little bit. And like, on nights that you're going to be with them or drinking and things like that, if you can check in with me a little more, or like send an extra text, or just small things like that would go a really, really long way. And so what you're doing is you're like, you don't get to say like, you can't live with them. Right. It would be slightly different if like, it's like, he has the kids and the kids are living there too. And they're your children as well. Like, but I wouldn't say you have too much say in like where he lives. But I would say you absolutely have a say on how much your needs are met or unmet by where he's living, and what you need to feel more comfortable, feel more safe, feel more included in the situation that could be disrupting your needs from being met. And so that's what I would be communicating about and what I would be doubling down on. And then I would definitely also do that internal work. And other than that, I mean, I think you're doing a great job. Like, I think by being able to recognize that, see what's coming up, notice your thoughts, notice your patterns, realize that there is like a strong reaction and it's like an internal wound that's being activated, and knowing that there's more stories for how triggered I am and that those things are directly correlated. Fantastic job. And those would be the steps I would take. So great question. And thank you for sharing. Okay. The next question I see here is from Thana. Hi, Thana. How are you this evening? So Thana says, I was married to a DA from when I was 17 for 20 plus years. He had no boundaries with anyone, but I didn't know that at the time. All I knew is that I always felt frustrated with him. In a relationship with me, he was either passive aggressive or tried to de-escalate conflicts by giving in. Never gave in actually, just promised the world and then forgot. He also took on all of my hobbies, I think, and it felt like we had many similarities between us. Now we are best friends in relationships with others, and his lack of boundaries is even more triggering. An example of a no boundary. There's a war in Ukraine and his wife doesn't want to leave. Instead of him putting his foot down to fly her and the kids to the States where he lives, he flies to her in Ukraine because that's what she's demanding. He has no ability to say no, even at the time of crisis. Why would I get triggered by that? Is it my shadow? I am an FA. And yes, let's hope for safety and prayers and blessings for everybody in the Ukraine right now. It's such a scary situation. It's like, sometimes can't believe like, oh my gosh, we're living through this in 2022, pretty wild. And obviously we're not in the same way anybody there is, but still just a little shocking, right? And hopefully everybody's safe and doesn't have family there or anything like that. But in the situation, there's a couple things that are probably happening because this was somebody who was such an important figure in your life. You were together for 20 plus years since you were 17. I mean, that's like it's like you're growing up with that person, right? You're going through your teenage years with that person growing up, and then all the way through like a massive part of your adult life. So there may be a part of you that gets triggered separate from everything else just because you feel afraid for this person that you care about, right? That you may just feel like, I am helpless to do anything or to know if this person's okay. And it's a dear, dear person to you in your life, whether you are just loving them as a friend or as just somebody who is a distant person in your life, let alone a best friend in your life now. So there may be a part of you that feels triggered just because you're helpless as well to know that they'll be okay and things like that. And that would be a very normal reaction. But at a deeper level, most likely there's some sort of shadow point there. So what you could ask yourself to look at is, what is the trait that I'm judging? Okay, so boundaryless, too passive, inauthentic because he's not showing up for himself, too agreeable, just always says yes to everything. And what you would look at is, where do I show up in that way in my life? And you would look in all the different 7 areas. So where am I agreeable? Too much in my career, too much with my finances. Like maybe you always agree to pay bills for all of your friends when you all eat at dinner or whatever it might be. Career, financially, mentally. So you're learning your thoughts, beliefs, opinions, emotionally, this sort of work, spiritually, physical, around health, body, appearance, and then relationships, other relationships, friends, family, co-working, romantic. And try to look and take inventory and see. And usually when we're really personalizing somebody else's traits, especially because he's like more distant from you now and it triggers you even more, to me, it does sound like there's a big shadow piece there. And I would do that for all the different things. So agreeable, boundaryless, inauthentic, if that's in there, because not showing up for himself, and whatever other traits you can find in there, I would look for and do shadow work on. So really, really great question, great insight, and hopefully that helps. And hopefully he's okay and safe, and prayers for you and for him and for his family. Okay, the next question I see here is from Anonymous. Hello, Anonymous. How are you? So Anonymous says, when we're not hurt as much from the things that would normally hurt us, how do we know if it's because the wounds get less triggered or it's because the less strong of attachment we have with the other person, so they don't have a lot of power over us? Thanks for the answer. Great question. Number one, you would look at like extrapolating it outwards. Like, is this happening to me just with this person? Or the things that would normally hurt me from all people in this area. So if it's like feeling abandoned, and maybe you would normally feel a fear of abandonment with that person, but also a little bit with friendships and with family relationships and things like that, has that subsided quite a bit with everybody? Okay, not just the one person. Really good way to differentiate. Another thing is you can look at where am I at with this person as a whole? Like, is this person hurting me less, but overall I'm like in a pretty good place in the relationship. Maybe my attachment cell is not being activated as much, but like I feel pretty good overall. And usually if you're feeling pretty good overall, but then there's like just a pain point in one area, that's usually showing you that it's because you're working through triggers and the triggers are happening less often. And you can look for like multiple things, or my trigger is sort of diminishing in many areas of my life with different triggers as well. And if that's the case, and again, these are signs that it's because your wounds are getting less triggered, because they're getting smaller, because you're not feeding into them so often and refeeding them through repetition plus emotion. And the golden sort of rule here is, just like muscles, neural pathways atrophy over time. So in technicality, while we sit here and we think, okay, I would like to stop feeling the wound, I am trapped or I am unloved or whatever it might be, we can reprogram. But technically, if you just stop feeding it at any point in time as well, it will also atrophy and start to go away more slowly. So slowly but surely, these things will diminish. And just based on the way you asked your question, I wouldn't be surprised if the wound is just less intense. But check in, like, has that happened in other areas of life? And are you feeling connected to the person overall, and like the relationship's in a healthy place, in a good place? And maybe that's part of what's going, if you see that and yet you're less triggered, really, really good sign. So great question. And thank you for sharing. Okay. The next question I see here, ooh, this is a great one, is from Lucy. Hi, Lucy. How are you? So Lucy says, what do you do if your needs don't align with what is deemed acceptable in society? For example, I prefer breaking up over text, but I know most people think you should do it in person. Am I supposed to force myself to? But then I feel like I'm not listening to my needs or boundaries, which I also have trouble with. So this is a really cool question. The answer is that you can still get your needs met. So let's break this down. First of all, should you align your needs with whatever society says is acceptable? I would say a hard no in general. I mean, what I would say so let's say, for example, people say everybody should be on Instagram. Like, do you want to be on Instagram? Like, what your needs should be chosen from the inside out. Where we have like the difference between that and something else is, are we hurting somebody else in some form or doing something that could be more hurtful to somebody else by meeting just our needs and not considering the other person? So a breakup is a better kind of example of like, hey, you may be hurting somebody a little bit extra, and there may be value in choosing to pay attention to that, right? Like, hey, it might be hurtful to somebody else for me to not communicate in this form, or to break up in person or over the phone. But here's what you can do is the first question would be, can I just change the form I'm getting my needs met in? So the exercise would be, you look and you're like, well, why? What need does it meet to be able to break up over text? Does it meet the need for safety? Does it meet the need for comfort? Does it meet the need to have time boundaries where I don't have to like stick around for too long after? And in that case, what can I do to take the other person into consideration so I'm not hurting anybody, and then try my best to get my needs met for safety, for comfort, and to have good time boundaries while breaking up with the person in person? And if you go there and you just can't, or if you try to think about it and you're like, I can't, I absolutely panic. I hate it. It terrifies me. It's impossible. I really don't like it. I way prefer breaking up over text. Then you would just take a step back and be like, well, then what's the next closest thing? Maybe it's over a phone call. And maybe that's your compromise, right? And in that case, it would be, well, then let me call the person. Let me tell the person, I would have liked to be there in person. It's really hard for me to do this. I couldn't help it. I have to do it over the phone. And, here's where I'm coming from. And then when you're looking at like how you could get the needs met for safety, comfort, and time boundaries, you can set a boundary for time ahead of time. Let's just say, for the sake of talking about the in-person version, that you say, when you sit down, hey, we have to have a conversation. This isn't going to be the best conversation. And unfortunately, I really only have about 15 minutes. And I think it's better we keep this short. Okay. So time boundary checked. And then you're looking for security and comfort. So how do you feel secure and more comfortable doing this? It's an uncomfortable situation. Prepare a statement ahead of time, right? Know what you can do ahead of time to like equilibrate their wounds so they're not, there's not going to be a lot of stuff in there. If you know it's an anxious person, for example, maybe you say, hey, it's not about you not being good enough. You were good enough in this way, and this way. I just don't feel like it's a match. And this is where I'm coming from, and it's non-negotiable for me at this point, and I wish you the best, right? So like you would just prepare a kind, compassionate statement ahead of time, because then you feel more secure, you feel more comfortable in the situation. And it's a way of taking the needs that you're getting from doing it over text and just finding new forms to get those needs met so that you still feel comfortable and taken into consideration, but you can also consider the other person. Does it mean that you always have to do that? Absolutely not. It's just a good way of like checking in, seeing if that feels comfortable for you, seeing if that feels safe for you. And if not, then what about a phone call? What's the next closest thing? And if not, it's okay. Like at the end of the day, to do that, but just put in the text that this was hard for me. I'm sorry I couldn't be there in person. I wish I could be. This is something I'm working on. I'm unable to give this at this time. It's too scary for me. Just be vulnerable about it. So you like own your part of it. And then try to make sure you're taking the time to put the extra kindness into the breakup message. So check in with each of those different things. And also if there's something really traumatic there for you, where it just feels like I can't do it, I feel like I'm going to absolutely panic, then also at some point it's worth doing reprogramming on whatever it is that's showing up for you so strongly that's making it such a big, scary thing for you, because it's also a call that there's something that needs to be loved inside of yourself, something that needs to be healed, paid attention to, some wound where maybe you take on too much guilt chronically for how other people are feeling, or some wound where you feel unsafe being vulnerable to people or having tough conversations, whatever it might be, worth checking in there as well. So excellent question. Okay, so the next question I see here is from Lucy. Hi, Lucy. Oh, no, sorry, Lucy. I just answered your question. I'm sorry. From Shirley. Hi, Shirley. How are you? So Shirley says, I am an AA, leaning secure, currently dating a DA, but he is usually good at communicating. for example, doesn't shut down when I try to communicate with him. However, I feel like I make the most, if not all of the effort in the relationship. He is happy to hang out with me, but sometimes I feel like if I don't get intimate, I'll probably barely see or hear from him. It says if I don't get initiate, I think you mean if I don't get intimate. And maybe it auto-corrected you. But maybe you said if I don't initiate communication, if I don't initiate, let me just reread this. He is happy to hang out with me, but sometimes I feel like if I don't, you're probably saying if I don't initiate, then I'll probably barely see or hear from him. He has been busy with his work, and I understand, but one day last week, I tried to not initiate contact all day, and I didn't hear from him all day. When I finally messaged him, he replied an hour later saying he was out for drinks with his work colleagues, which was fine by me, but it would have been nice to hear from him. I did ask you, could you please be in touch because it's important to me and I miss you when I don't see or hear from you. He said, I can do that, but I feel like he hasn't much. I've also told him that words of affirmation are important to me, but he still barely says I love you unless I say it first. Is there anything I can do or am I hitting a brick wall? I did ask him to put in an effort for Valentine's Day and he did try and bought me some flowers. I did ask, but I would like for him to initiate more. Great question. Okay, so Shirley, there's a few key things in here that are quite important to recognize. The very first thing is the internal relationship that the person has to it, right? And sometimes this becomes like a long-term, like standards, non-negotiable conversation in a relationship. So let's break this down here for a moment. What I see first is that there's a dynamic where it's like you ask him to initiate. He seems to be trying in some ways, but not in others. Over the years, I've had different types of conversations with dismissive avoidance. One of the popular ones with very strong dismissive avoidance is I don't text my partner first because it feels too uncomfortable for me and I'm unwilling to go there. And I'm like, but you've been in a relationship for 2 years. What do you mean? And I've heard things in response to situations like that where somebody's like, well, I just don't like it. I don't want to feel vulnerable. I don't like that feeling. I can't do it. And they're just shut down and closed. And when you really dig into it, it's just this terrifying fear of feeling ashamed by reaching out and not getting an answer back, feeling too vulnerable and that feeling really unsafe, these sorts of things. So, what I hear so far is not that you're communicating once or twice and then expecting him to remember and then feeling so upset that he doesn't. I hear that you're kind of communicating pretty consistently, which may bring you to a crossroads. It's like you keep communicating. Do you see the needle moving or not? And then if the answer is no, really it may rely on that person to do some of the internal work. And the question is, well, do they or don't they? So what I would say first is we can try a couple things before we get to this point of like, do we consider setting a deadline around the relationship? Do we consider like, hey, is this going to work? Is this a fit or not? And what I would say is see your needs through. I see you've kind of been doing that. So that tells me like, hey, maybe this is really relying on this person's internal work to take place, but see your needs through, see what happens. Really positively reinforce when he does do stuff. Hey, thank you so much for Valentine's Day. I noticed that DAs often don't reach out first or don't do things because they don't feel capable. They're not sure if they're doing it right. They don't want to put themselves out there and do the wrong thing and then get criticized. And like, it just feels like it's too much. So usually when you start giving positive feedback, like, hey, you're moving in the right direction. I loved those flowers for Valentine's Day. That really meant a lot to me. I see you're trying. Thank you. These sorts of things. Then they start feeling safer and safer because they're like, oh, I'm capable. I can do these things and it works well. And so they start to feel safer and then they can kind of like flower and like start opening up more and like, doing these things more often. That tends to be one of the best remedies, as long as you're also checking in to make sure you're communicating very clearly, very specifically. So the other piece of feedback, if I was going through this with like a fine-tooth comb, right? If we were in like a session together, doing counseling and I was like, okay, here are the really specific things, I would also say to you, you said, can you please be in touch? It's important to me and I miss you when I don't see or hear from you. I would even get a little bit more specific and I would say, hey, can you just like initiate a text message, just say good morning or hi, like once or twice a week extra, like that would be a great place to start. And then when he does say good morning or hi, like be really responsive, say thank you, like, notice it or mention it on a date night. Like, hey, I notice you're like making an effort. It really means something to me. Just like little things can go a really long way that way. So if you get a little more specific about what you mean by words of affirmation, giving an example of those sorts of things is great. Probably pick one thing at a time and then positively reinforce when that one thing happens. And then you will either see the needle move and be like, the needle is moving, this is great. Or if he's a really strong DA that's unwilling, then it's going to rely on him. Like, are you going to do the internal reprogramming? Are you going to show up and expose yourself, do a little exposure work outside of your comfort zone and try or not? And if the answer is no, then you may come to a crossroads where you're like, okay, I'm communicating, I'm seeing my needs through, I'm being specific, I'm being very validating and acknowledging and appreciative when there are good things that are taking place and the needle's still not moving and the person's not really doing the work. And so how important is this to me in a relationship? Am I willing to stay in a relationship if it's going to be sort of the way it has been? And you may set a deadline and decide, okay, I'll try for another month. And then if it's not, the needle's not moving and I keep talking about it and saying how important it is to me, then I may have to make a decision to go in a different direction. So those would be the steps I would take in that order. And really, really great question. And thank you for sharing. Okay. The next question I see here is from Shauna. Hi, Shauna. How are you this evening? So Shauna says, I am new to PDS the past few days and just beginning to learn here. I've done the quiz and come up with secure attachment. However, I know that my parents and I do not really ever discuss emotions, and I feel that I am not so in tune with my emotions. I am a thinker and can assess things from that viewpoint. I am just wondering if I'm actually secure. Great question, Shauna. A lot of times, sometimes when we're self-reporting, we can be reporting from like different sort of frames of mind and reference. And usually when I hear these patterns where it's like, I don't ever really discuss my emotions. I'm not in tune with my emotions. I assess things particularly from a thinking viewpoint and not from like being able to incorporate my emotional feelings and viewpoint into the situation kind of equally. Usually that tells me those are some patterns very much leaning towards dismissive avoidance. And it may be that you're predominantly secure, but just have a pretty strong DA side that's like your secondary attachment style or that has an influence on your security in a relationship or in all relationships. So what I would highly recommend is take the DA course. Just take the dismissive avoidant reprogramming course, check it out, see if some of those patterns and themes are in there for you. And if they are, then I would be like, okay, this is my work. And I may, and all the course tracks are outlined. So if you look, it says like dismissive avoidant, and it actually shows the courses, and those courses are ordered in the way I would recommend taking them. So you can click on like the little tabs that say dismissive avoidant, relationships, all the different things on your dashboard, and it will suggest the courses for those things. And just so you guys all know, those courses are actually in order. So like you click on like the breakup tab, it's like how to heal from a breakup, strengthening self-identity. It's recommended you take that in that order. Again, these are just recommendations. You can do whatever you want at the end of the day, but and see what resonates with you. And if you want to try one course and come back to another, all of that's perfectly acceptable. But that's what I would recommend doing for you, Shauna, specifically, is like check out the DA course, see if there's some big patterns in there that resonate with you. If so, then I would like finish the course, and then I would go back to continuing the course track from those steps and in that order. So great question and welcome. We're happy you're here and looking forward to future questions you might have. Okay, the next question I see here is from Angela. Hi, Angela. How are you this evening? So Angela says, hi, Thais. What motivates someone to start on their healing and personal development journey? I know that FAs tend to be drawn to it more because personal growth is a huge need for us. How about the other attachment styles? Are there specific wounds, traits, or life situations that may make someone more or less likely to do this work? Thanks. Okay, cool question. So here's what I would say. The first thing that I'll often see is that you may be motivated to start a personal development journey because personal growth can be huge. And also like the need for like emotional connection and the idea for a fearful avoidant that you can kind of get that emotional connection from yourself and from the relationship to yourself can be very powerful. Like, wow, like this whole new thing here. Growth and challenge can be quite like resonating with fearful avoidance in general. And the idea that you can gain control over how you feel can be quite appealing to fearful avoidance as well, right? The need for controlling my own self and my own life so nobody else can control me can be a bit of a motivating factor for FAs. When it comes to AP, some of the biggest, and we see this all with, all the time with the lovely APs in here, where it's like, I hear so often from APs, something like this. I came into the school because I wanted to fix my relationship and I learned about the relationship to myself. And I see that often where it's like, okay, I hear you. You came in for that reason. And then you saw this really important thing that was able to like support you. And so you moved in that direction instead. So really amazing. Great work if that's what you're doing as an AP, because oftentimes we get motivated to take those first steps because we're like, if I do this work, I'll be less likely to be abandoned because I'll become more secure. Or if I do this work, I'll be more likely to have a success in romantic relationships. All of these things are beautiful entry points into the self, right? Whether it's for control or growth or relationships or whatever it might be, it's all serving the same thing, which is to learn about myself, do the inner healing, which actually primes me to have the best, most healthy relationship long-term. For dismissive avoidance, there can be a huge learning feature. There can also be a huge personal growth feature. I'm finding more and more dismissive avoidance get really interested in personal growth. And there can be other core wounds like knowing and sort of realizing, oh my gosh, I shame myself a lot and wanting to be free of shame. And realizing that, oh, I can control that. That's my subconscious mind. And the idea that we can get relief from our big wounds of feeling helpless or trapped or ashamed, or for fearful avoidance, feeling powerless or feeling like we can't trust, or for anxious, preoccupied, feeling like we're abandoned, excluded, or not good enough. That can be really motivating for like, hey, if I do this work, this will be something that really, really frees me from these things so I can feel at peace and I can thrive in my life and relationships and break through things that feel like they're sort of stifling or hurting or repressing me. So really, really great question. Okay, I'm going to answer one more written question and then I will do some live questions here for a little bit as well. Okay, so the last question I have here for now is from Lisa. Hello, Lisa. How are you? So Lisa says, hi, Thais. I am equally DA and FA, and I have a terrible time controlling my impulse to interrupt a conversation. And it's driven my partner and family crazy. Any tips for catching myself so I just listen and shut up? I just signed up with PDS yesterday, and I'm so happy to have found personal development. I'm presently taking the emotional mastery course before the handbook and DA and FA courses. Thanks. Okay, amazing questions. So welcome. I'm glad that you're here. I would say a few important things, okay? The first thing is to recognize every single thing that our subconscious mind does is to get a need met in some form. So when you're in this situation and you have this like impulse to interrupt, usually it's to meet a certain need. And it can be for a few different reasons. Sometimes it's the need to be seen, the need to be heard, the need to be understood, the need to be included, the need to be noticed. And so what you would look at is like, what need am I trying to meet when I interrupt? What is that like right before I have that impulse? What's sparking it? Is it maybe that I want to state my opinion and share my opinion because I'm really passionate about this topic that we're discussing? And if so, look closely. What are the topics? Is it when it comes to politics? Is it when it comes to personal growth or career-oriented things? Or like, what is it that you feel that like impulse to share? And whatever's sponsoring that could be a strong personality need. You'll see that a lot when you do the personality needs course. So you might find, for example, first it's around certain topics. Another thing might just be you fear being excluded from the conversation and not jumping in and saying your part, or you fear somebody violating your boundary by speaking and you not getting to have your say or defend yourself. And maybe in that case, it's the need to like protect yourself in the situation. So what I would do is if you're not, so in steps to make it super specific, step one, is there a certain type of conversation where this happens? And if so, go into your personality needs course, look at just the workbook. Don't even finish the courses you're doing in the order you're doing them. Go to the needs course after. But just look in the workbook for now and you'll see at the back, there's like this huge needs list, and try to look at like those conversations that we're having. Is there some sort of need that gets met in those conversations? Okay. Like a personality need specifically around emotional connection, around, politics or spirituality or achievement or career growth or something where you get so excited to talk because it's so important to you. You're so passionate about it. And if that's the case, then you'll do a little needs reprogramming work on getting that need met in other forms on a regular basis. I'll take you through that part at the end of this answer. The second thing would be, if it's not that, what need are you getting met in general from doing that? And again, it could be to be seen, to be heard, to defend yourself, to be included, these sorts of things. You'll see those more in your tertiary needs list. Those are your moment to moment needs, and they're also in the back of your workbook, so you can check in there. And then what you'll do is, whichever one it is, it's showing you that you have a need there that's deeply trying to get met. And when you want to like change the relationship to your behaviors that revolves around your needs, what you want to be able to do is sit down and write, so that you make more negative emotional associations to this. What is the cost of me interrupting? What is it cost to me? What does it cost to my long-term relationships? What does it cost to how I feel in those relationships, how people treat me? And look at the cost, so that that impulse, you start getting to rewire, right? You start making more negative emotional associations, because whenever we have a compulsion to do something, it's because our subconscious mind already has a program that's like, this is the way I meet my need, and this is a good way. But sometimes we can have these like compulsory things where, as an example, maybe as a child, if you had a temper tantrum, maybe it met your needs because maybe your caregivers would come to you and cradle you and hug you and give you candy. And so you're like, oh, your brain may have been programmed at 6 years old to think, oh, when I have a temper tantrum, I get attention, I get love, I get candy, I get my needs met. But then sometimes we see Bob, who's, you know, in his 60s, and he's still having adult temper tantrums in the boardroom meeting when he feels triggered, right? And so what we have to recognize is our brain at a subconscious level may have said, this is a good thing, because it might have worked at some point in time. But then in our adult life, we still have subconscious programming that says it works. And yet our situation has changed, and our conscious mind knows, but our subconscious mind doesn't. So when we're doing reprogramming around our needs, how we do it is we try to break those exclusive positive emotional associations. So like if you were Bob and you're 60 and you're having an adult temper tantrum, you'd be like, okay, what does this cost me? You're trying to use your conscious mind to teach your subconscious mind through repetition and emotion of new associations that actually this is not so good. Sometimes it's hurting me in some ways. It costs me respect in the workplace to have an adult temper tantrum. It costs me people feeling like they can talk to me and communicate with me and work with me and cooperate. And so you'd see all the different costs. And then what are the benefits of being more patient? Right. And it's kind of the same one for you. It'd be like, so that's Bob's. If he's getting angry, what are the benefits of being more calm and regulated? And for you, Lisa, it would be, what are the benefits of being more patient in the situation, of being in a situation where I'm able to let somebody else be seen and heard, and hold my tongue for just a few moments before I get seen? And what are the costs of not doing that? So you're kind of rewiring the emotional associations through the form that you're used to having your needs met in. And then what you can do is find healthier ways to get those needs met on a regular basis. Because usually when we can't help ourselves in a moment, it's also symptomatic in a way of us being out of relationship to that need overall. So if I need to get seen and heard, and so I interrupt, usually I don't feel seen and heard enough in my life on a regular basis. So my subconscious mind has these coping mechanisms that it can't help but use in real time. And so maybe I'd be like, oh, to get seen and heard more often in a regular basis in my life, so my mind doesn't have to rely on this way of doing it, maybe I'll practice being more vulnerable. Maybe I'll practice sharing more of my inner world with others so I can feel better seen and heard and understood. Maybe I'll state my needs more in relationships. Maybe I will set better boundaries so people can understand what's not okay for me. And so you're trying to find updated ways of meeting those needs while also reprogramming the potential slant of positive versus negative emotional associations you have relative to this compulsory behavior you have. And the last thing I would say is to not judge yourself. It's just a coping mechanism your need has. It's not a big deal to not help but be able to interrupt, but it's something you can just overcome and work through. And if you want, I know that was a lot of information if you're new, but it's actually all in a worksheet, and that whole exercise is laid out in the needs course, and it teaches you how to do this stuff, and all that stuff is there. So great question. Hello and welcome. And thank you for sharing. Okay, I am going to go through some live questions here. So the first person I see here is Camicia. Is that how I say your name? It's a beautiful name.
It's Kamisha.
Hi. Oh, hold on. I think my volume's all the way down. There we go.
Kamisha, hi, Thais. Thank you for selecting my question.
Welcome. You're welcome.
I think we have a little bit of a theme today. Someone else mentioned a parent with BPD. My mom is also, she is FA and she's high on the BPD spectrum, very high. And so last summer she was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. And so there's also a lot of other things like codependency and enmeshment, just lots of volatility. But since I joined the school in 2020, I've been working really hard to kind of unlearn a lot of those patterns. So I was able to really show up for her and take her to all of her appointments. And I would fly. We don't live in the same state, so I would fly to her every month, spend 2 or 3 weeks with her, and really try to make sure she's getting the appropriate care that she needs, make sure she gets the help that she needs. And a month or two ago, my husband and I had a talk and realized that it was really wearing on me personally, having to fly back and forth for so long. So we decided to move here. And my mom insisted that we stay with her. So when we moved here 3 weeks ago, we moved into her house and things went very badly, very quickly. It is very accurate what you say about the subconscious comfort zone, because I realized that I married someone very much like my mom. So he was getting triggered, she was getting triggered because of both their shadow, and he was getting triggered because of some childhood trauma. And she also felt like he was competition.
Wow.
And so everything kind of blew up on Monday night, because she was just being very disrespectful, very mean. And for the first time in probably my life, I stood up to her and I just said, "You're going to stop yelling at me. You're going to stop saying like these things that aren't true." And she kicked us out. And it's, luckily my best friend has a spare room, and we're not like financially dependent on my mom. So we're looking for a place to stay right now. It's just the process of, getting everything approved just takes more than a couple of days. But I'm really torn. My mom started chemo again today. She had started radiation again today, and it's going to wear on her a lot. And I want very badly to be there for her, but all of my boundaries are very blurred right now. It seems like everything's incredibly blurred right now. Mm-hmm. And on top of that, I'm very triggered. This whole situation, her kicking me out, really triggered my "I am unsafe" wound. And her being so angry at me and yelling such mean things at me really triggered my "I am bad" wound. And now I feel like a bad daughter. I feel like I abandoned her. Even though she kicked me out, I feel like I abandoned her. And I'm just not sure what to do. I went to her radiation appointment this morning, but my aunt was there. And because of COVID, they only let one person stay, so I left. But I just don't know what to do. I don't know how to be there for myself and for her.
I know. Okay, so the first thing is you're in a really, really tough situation, and like you need some love and some support. Like you need to give yourself a little bit of a break. Like there's so much, it's already so scary to have a parent that we love, who no matter how old we get, even if you're an adult now and not a kid, there's still a deep, profound connection. And it's really scary to think like I might lose this person. Now I'm going to ask you a really hard question. Okay. And I want you to promise me when you try to answer that you'll be as honest with yourself as possible. Okay. Now, I'll preface it by saying, when we are dishonest with ourselves at all, even for the nicest of reasons, even because we're afraid to feel guilty, it will show back up in the relationship as resentment, as frustration, as pain points and challenges. Okay. So imagining that your mother would not be hurt by any decision you made, it would not affect her, it had no power to affect her whatsoever. What do you need to feel safe, to feel comfortable, to feel like you're in the best situation possible? Assuming her behavior is not going to change.
I need to have a home of my own.
Yes.
Because I can't be in another position where she can kick me out.
Yes.
And I have nowhere to go.
And can I tell you why else? And I knew this was the right answer, but you had to say it. If I told you it, it wasn't going to do as much. You know why else is really important? Because it's going to be really taxing. You love her. It doesn't make you bad for feeling drained by the situation, but it's a tremendous amount of pressure. I mean, like, you're being a caretaker and you have a husband, and do you have kids as well with you?
No, I don't. Not
Okay,
yet.
so that's good. At least there's not not that you don't want kids, but that would just be so much spread so thin, right? So like, but you still have yourself. You've got your husband, then you've got the triggering events between them, then you've got your mother who has BPD, who's also going through cancer treatment. Like, you can do for your mother, just like the best thing a parent can do for their child is to take care of themselves first, because then you show up, and when you do show up, you're coming from this like safe place, comfortable place, recharge place. You come and you show up in that relationship as your best self. And that's the only thing that your mother needs, is somebody who's like truly loving, truly there, because you're strong from the inside out. And when we don't show up that way, when we are feeling fractured or pulled in different directions, when we're feeling unsafe, when we are foregoing our own boundaries altogether to be there for somebody else, even though the justification may be, oh, but the person's sick, and so it's an extreme situation. The extreme situations call even more for you to be able to caretake for yourself first. It doesn't go the opposite direction. It only goes that direction. And so I would strongly recommend get your own place. Spend some time creating intentional boundaries. Like, how long can I be there with her before I get triggered by the back and forth between her and my husband? How long can I be there before I feel like I start getting depleted, I need a break, and I need to come back again later, or come back tomorrow? And I would actually allocate conscious and intentional boundaries for how you can show up. And then I would actually tell her, this is the schedule for when I'm coming by. You have already done so much. You've been flying back and forth across the country every few weeks for months to be there for 2 weeks at a time. You moved your home, you moved your husband, you moved your entire roots of where you were to go be there for her. You're doing more than enough. And so stop pressuring yourself and start taking yourself into consideration and seeing yourself as much as you're trying to see your mom. And then see what you need, what works for you, what amount of time you can put that's going to make you feel still rooted and safe and comfortable, and still have time to have a healthy, happy relationship with your husband, and take the time to really get conscious about it, and maybe put a little schedule together. It doesn't have to be like a rigid thing, but something you can try to stick to in the best way possible. What do you feel when I say all of that?
Validated.
Good. And you're doing so much, and I hope you know that. And I feel like you have a huge heart, but I feel like you have to leave some heart for yourself too.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. And thank you for sharing yourself. Really beautiful question. Okay, Athira, please go ahead. Oh, did it unmute you? There we go. Hi.
Hi.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good.
Yeah. So, I mean, life is getting better. Life is good. So, just
Great.
vibing, like I'm showing up primarily as secure and all that, like in different areas of life, and there is a balance in life finally. But I can see a little bit of FA coming up again. So that's like I'll just give like a couple of examples. So one is like in career, like I'm getting all the recognition, for the work, and people are seeing the value, and it's all great. Like, people are, I'm getting seen and heard and everything, recognized and everything. That's great. And I'm getting a lot of responsibilities and all that at work. And I've started dating somebody, and like, I think like we are entering the honeymoon phase, so which is like for the first time consistent affection. Boring. So I think this person is secure, leaning D. I do see DA patterns, but primarily secure. So it's all good. I think like I'm getting time for myself also. There is a balance, but what I'm seeing right now is primarily a fear of being controlled at work. And the relationship, this person is not really controlling me. Nobody at work is controlling me. They're actually trusting me in a way by giving more responsibility. But I'm feeling like, oh, people are controlling me, like the relationship and the work. And also, I'm feeling a little overwhelmed with I do not like responsibility in general, because I feel like trapped. So
it's an FA thing sometimes, for sure. Yeah.
And also, and I'm getting a little uncomfortable with being seen and heard. Like, this is work, yes, and that's like leads and senior people are like recognizing my work, which I should be feeling good about. But I'm like, I feel like hiding and like switching teams and switching companies and all that. And with the relationship also, it's almost like, oh, this person is consistent, and I'm like, this doesn't feel natural, because all my major relationship were like narcissistic relationship with love bombing and everything. So it feels different. And the good thing, like work, I'm not doing taking any actions, just my thoughts, and I know it's only thoughts and stories. With this person, whenever I feel like all these FA tendencies, I'm communicating that to that person. So it's like, oh yeah, I mean, are you feeling trapped? Are you okay? It's like checking in with me. So that part is okay. But I want to know why, the like root cause of it, and what do I do, and why is it like popping up? Yeah.
Amazing question. Okay, first of all, just wanted to acknowledge you for all of your hard work and like getting to reap the rewards of all the work you put in to feel like balanced and healthy and safe and good relationships and all these things, and like just amazing. I know you've been working your butt off in here and doing so much. So and even with your family and everything, so amazing, and it's so beautiful to see that. Here's what's happening. You are going like this, and this is really common for FAs. The more seen and heard I feel, now I feel like people hold me to a certain expectation. I'm doing all the hard work. I'm getting acknowledged. And people think I'm always going to be this great. And then I put expectations and pressure on myself that I then project onto other people, assuming that they're putting on me. And that's why you feel like they're trying to control you.
Okay.
Does that make sense so far?
I think work, yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So usually what happens is, like, this is very common for FAs. It's like perfectionism trauma a little bit. It's like, and sometimes when so let's say you do an assignment, you turn it in early. Okay. Just as an example, let's say it's Bob. Bob turns an assignment early. All of his colleagues are like, wow, you turned an assignment in early. You did so well at it as well. You're amazing. All these things, all these compliments, words of affirmation. And then Bob gets another assignment. And Bob, if he hasn't worked through perfectionism patterns with himself, is going to turn around and be like, oh, I better put this one in early because now there's a standard set for me. Now people think I'm always going to be this way. And then what happens is then he starts pressuring himself and expecting a lot from himself. And then when he's around people who are like, oh, Bob, how are you doing on the assignment? And they might just be asking, how are you doing on the assignment? Bob's like, oh, here they are pressuring me and expecting so much from me. And usually it's like a little bit of his shadow. And so I've seen this a lot with fearful avoidance over the years. And I wouldn't be surprised if that's part of the pattern driving in the workplace, which is like, oh, now I'm getting all this recognition and now people are, going to expect this from me. And that's why you're like, I want to be unseen, because you're like, wait, I want the pressure off. I want the expectations away. I want everything to be simplified. Does that show up for you a little bit? Yeah. So you want a really good course for that is going to be the perfectionism trauma course, and just going in and fine tuning. You'll probably find it's just minor at this point, but just like little patterns in there of like the belief systems that tend to sponsor some of those things, reprogramming them, being a little bit better with your boundaries, your needs, all that kind of stuff. So I would say that that's there. The relationship sounds like it might be slightly different. there may be some of that too, like, oh, this person expects a lot from me, or I expect a lot from myself in the relationship, because it may have been a subconscious comfort zone in past relationships, feeling a narcissist expects so much from you, and then projecting that onto the person. But more than that, I would just say, like, being checked in with your boundaries in the romantic relationship, and not being afraid. Like, we won't feel like, oh, we're trapped, when we feel 100% comfortable speaking up for a boundary in the moment and not having to people please. And so if you feel like, oh, I don't feel like going for a date on Friday because it's Thursday and I'm exhausted and I just need the night to myself. But then you're like, oh, no, but it'll be rude to cancel at the last minute. It'll, and you put pressure, you people please, or there's little parts of self-abandonment that start to take place in a romantic relationship. That's going to be where that kicks up some of those control wounds. Like, oh, no, I have to be there. I have to. And really, it's like you controlling yourself and projecting it a bit onto the other person as well.
Yeah, I think it's almost like if I take initiative, I'm okay. But if he takes initiative, I'm like, and I will actually do the exact same thing the next day. Then I had a conversation like, if I do something, you're feeling trapped, but you do exactly the same thing the next day. So why is that happening? Yeah.
And that's showing you that you don't feel comfortable responding without probably maybe fearing you're going to hurt him or something. Like, if he initiates and you don't feel like it, say no. Feel comfortable saying no, or say, hey, not today, but next week. But if you feel 100% comfortable saying no to anything that doesn't feel good for you, not people pleasing, having really good boundaries in all the little tiny situations, the big ones you're probably doing really well, but all those little tiny ones, then you can't feel trapped, right? Because you feel fully free to express, fully free to say no, fully free in the relationship to be yourself. So it's always sort of showing there may be some like little people pleasing going on in different forms, little overextension of yourself or trying to earn your worth in some way, or little pressure that you put on yourself to a certain degree. And as long as you clean that up, you'll start to feel free and safe in that situation as well.
Okay.
Awesome. Amazing work. Great job as always.
Thanks
and
to
thank
you.
you for sharing. Thank you. Okay, Ziomara, am I saying that correctly? I think you told me once before, and I'm so sorry. I'm not the best with remembering names. I'm such a face person. Yes. Okay, good. Hi, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. What's your question?
So I have a question about a friendship that I'm wondering if I should confront a friend because I still want to be friends with this person. However, I do feel like they used me to get to someone that I was close to. I I was friends with this person first, and then they developed interest into someone who was close to me. And when they didn't get what the outcome that they wanted with the friend of mine, they stopped talking to me. So I did value the friendship for what it was, but now I just feel used, and I'm like, I don't know if it's a part of like my people pleasing that I still want to mend or try to save whatever the friendship was, but I don't know if I should confront the situation or if I should just leave it alone and walk away overall.
Yeah. And when's the last time that how long were you friends with them for, and when's the last time you spoke since they ended the relationship with a person?
I would say it was a few months. So it was just a good friendship. Like, we used to talk all the time. Like, I would talk to this person at least once a week. And then little by little it dwindled down, and they started talking to the person more, and I'm like, oh, it's okay, that's fine, it happens. But then it just, after I would say like 2 or 3 months, the closer they grew to my friend, the less I heard from them. And it was like anytime there was any issues between them, it was taken out on me, where it was like, oh, I can't have communication with you because you're associated with that person.
And that's what they said to you?
No, that's just what I'm assuming. That's what I got. Like, I got no communication, and I got ignored whenever they were having issues with my friend.
Yeah. Okay. I hear that for sure. And just to be clear as well, did they have like a romantic connection, you and the friend, or was it just all friends together?
No, this is my friend. And I think they tried to develop a romantic connection between each other, but it didn't work out. Okay. Which I was, on my end, when my friend told me about it, I was supportive of it because I do like both people, but I can't help but feel used. because
Yeah,
I
I hear
kind of
that
got
for
cut out
sure.
of the situation once that person seemed to be getting what they wanted.
And do you know 100% that that person was using you?
No, I don't. And that's why I feel like I'm like, should I just leave the situation alone? I just feel used because communication stopped with me as soon as things went well with them, or even when it went bad. Communication just was like, hey, you're forgotten. You're like the third person now, even though,
Yeah.
the friendship was initially, two separate things. And then I joined them because I was like, oh, well, this is my friend. I think the connection will be great. If you like me, you're gonna like her. So yeah, it's a weird situation.
Yeah, I hear that. And
Like,
just as a question for you, could it be anything other than that? Could it, just knowing what you know about the person, could it be anything other than that person intentionally using you? Could they feel ashamed? Are they maybe really codependent in relationships and they kind of cut people out? Do they withdraw as a coping mechanism to lick their wounds when they're feeling hurt and the situation didn't work out? Do they feel embarrassed? Do they feel like, well, the person, you're better friends with the person and they may be saying negative things about this new person to you? Like, does any of that resonate, knowing what you know about the person at all?
um no, not really. I'm just confused in reality. Because communication stopped before things went wrong between them,
Mm.
which is what's bringing me back to feeling used, because it was like, as their connection grew, the more and more, and the more and more I was like not included, which is okay with me, but like,
Yeah. And it
I don't
could
know
be
how
like the
to say
person's
this.
codependent and it could be like these things. You would know because you're the person, what you know about this person and your friend, right? You know a little more. Really what it comes down to at the end of the day is quite simple. It's, do I value the friendship enough to try and to communicate and then to state my boundaries and needs? And it's going to be vulnerable, and it doesn't, like, number one, it's possible, right, that the person was just using you in the friendship, right? The fact that you talked so much says, like, hey, it sounds like there is probably a bit of a two-way emotional bond there. But we don't know, like, some people can be that manipulative or that, whatever it might be. I can absolutely see why you'd feel used for whatever the reason is, because it doesn't feel good to be close to somebody and then introduce them to somebody else and then sort of feel like you become excluded in that relationship. So I can definitely see why you would feel that way. What I would just suggest is like taking a moment and considering, how worth it is it to me at this point now to just have a conversation? And it would have to be a kind of vulnerable one, which aren't always the easiest ones, but it would have to be something like, hey, I'm thinking of you. I miss chatting and hanging out and would love to reconnect. And then you'd have to see, does the person reconnect? Do they put in the effort? And then within a couple times of chatting and hanging out, I would advise the first or second time you see that person in person again, to let them know and say, hey, I felt a little like we disconnected and drifted apart the more you got close in the relationship to my other friend. And that was tough for me. And consistency is really important to me in a relationship. I'd love to understand like what happened with you or what was going on. And I want you to know that that's going to be important for me going forward. So I would suggest going about it like that if it's worth it to you enough. If you're like, you know what, I feel too betrayed, I'm not really interested, it was only a few months, I'm not that interested in reinvesting my time and putting the emotional energy in to have that conversation and to do that work, because that's the only way it gets solved, is really through like vulnerability and doing that kind of stuff. If it just doesn't feel worth it to you at this point, then I would be like, okay, so if I felt used in the situation, what do I make that mean about me? That I'm an unworthy friend, or I'm not good enough, or I'm rejected, or things like that. And I would do the work on any core wounds that show up there and reprogram them, and then know what your needs are. Be like, well, what did I need in the friendship? Maybe consistency, maybe clarity, maybe inclusion, maybe like these different things, and just take that with you to forward relationships, future friendships, and let people know early those things are important to you, so that you don't invest time in the wrong friendships long term. So you kind of like have either option available to you, but it's going to be whichever one you think is worth your time at this point, given how long the friendship was and the depth and intensity of it. And only you can make that first decision.
Right. I definitely have like this an issue with just forgiving people with minimal to no explanation. and welcoming friendships back in my life that are not necessarily the most beneficial to me, just because I care for people and I try to give people the benefit of the doubt. So I don't know if like it's the AP in me who like adores the connections that I do make with the very few people that I do make deep connections with, that makes me want to, or if it's just my wounds and maybe I should, you know, stick up for myself in the situation and just walk away, given that it is only just a few months of friendship instead of years.
Yeah, and I would say you can, if it's been a pattern for you where you feel like you don't like, really the breaking of the pattern, which is like what we're kind of trying to do when we're growing anyways, is would be to have a conversation and get clarity. And if you see, you could weigh it, right? Because having a conversation would be like, if I usually have a hard time forgiving, it's an opportunity to grow, right? And we forgive through communicating and through gathering transparency and understanding into why someone did that they did. It can be very healing. So I would actually say in that case, you know, it's kind of a win-win if you grow by having the conversation, by initiating contact, seeing what was going on, and also by like really working on the meaning you give to the situation. Like if somebody doesn't show up well, isn't consistent back, you know, do you make that mean I'm unworthy, I'm not good enough, I'm rejected, and really doing that reprogramming work. But I would say move in that direction, see what happens. And no matter what, set the intention that you're like, it's not necessarily sticking up for yourself to walk away. It's sticking up for yourself to have a conversation and then let the person know in the conversation, hey, this wasn't cool with me. This is really important to me, that consistency, that whatever it might be. Or even just to have closure in the conversation with the person if you're not interested in doing that. The just leaving it, if we're trying to grow, can sometimes be the only thing that doesn't force growth, right? It just forces avoidance. And so I would say if you can move in that direction by opening the dialogue, letting the person know, power to you. I think it's a great idea. And really in future friendships, no matter what, being clear early on and letting somebody know, like in an ideal world, it will be weeks ago when you see the disconnect happening. That's when it's time to communicate and speak up. That's when it's time to say, hey, this is where I'm at. This isn't cool. Like I would like consistency in our friendship. I did feel like we really did get close and this matters to me. And then if somebody isn't able to get those needs met for you or show up for you in that way, repositioning your boundaries and how you see them as a friend to be maybe more of an acquaintance than a dear friend, and treating them accordingly. The big pain comes in when you give so much and you care so much, and then you're not showing yourself or communicating your needs. So it feels imbalanced. And then it really stings when the person doesn't reciprocate. So that's the deep pattern to break. And you can do that now through having a conversation. But if you feel like it's not worth it, then you can move in the other direction instead. Does that all make sense?
Yeah, it does. It is, and it's very helpful because I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't just like repeating my same pattern of like just letting people back in just for the sake of having a connection, and that it was worth having a conversation at least.
Yes. And that's your healing, is because you're vetting the person. You're not just letting them in or just letting them go. You're like taking yourself into consideration, showing your needs, communicating them, and then proceeding accordingly. So great work and wonderful question. Thank you for sharing. Princess Khan, it's so nice to see you. Hello.
Hi, Thais. Nice to see you too.
How are you doing?
Good, I'm good, thank you. And congrats on your engagement. I don't think I've spoken to you since then.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I have, it's actually going to piggyback off of the last question. That's funny because I'm having an issue with a friendship that's sort of ended or in limbo, I guess. But it's more of a broader issue too. So I'm just going to say the specifics, but generally I'm just more in my avoidance. So I'm having a hard time distinguishing what's avoidance and what's like towing the line to secure. So one of my good friends is my ex's sister. So we went on a trip last month, and it was like her birthday weekend. So we're pretty close, and she's been one of the people that like has been very like insightful about my ex and stuff like that, because they're very similar. They're very similar personalities. FA leaning avoidant. That's pretty much like all Afghans, I think, because of like our history, mostly FA. So just leaning anxious or avoidant. Their whole family is very leaning avoidant, and very enmeshed. So a lot of the things that come up are like entire family together issues kind of thing, because they're family friends. And so something happened during the trip. I don't really know, but she blocked me when we got back, even though, like, you know, it was a really good trip. I took her and we had her birthday and stuff like that. And then when she blocked me, um, I felt like comfortable being like, you know, we've had a good. Did you? I'm fine with talking about it. But of course, I was very hurt by the blocking. So she ignored it, which is very triggering for me. But it's more just like a standard, I think, where I think it's very rude to ignore people, especially somebody you're like friends with and basically family with that you're gonna keep seeing. It's not somebody that we're just gonna not see each other again.
Just to clarify, you're saying I felt like triggered from like a big unmet need, like it didn't feel good, but not from like a core wound sort of thing.
Yeah, like basically I wanted to talk about it. Like I was good talking about it and I didn't think we had a relationship that would trigger each other like this yet. So I was kind of surprised by it. We've been really good about being vulnerable and sort of in a very healthy like long-term way where we've slowly sort of opened up to each other and things like that. And I've started feeling more comfortable about telling her about my ex when it was more like secretive before that. So uh fairly recently, I think a couple weeks ago, I saw her at a mutual family friend's house. I had gone away a couple weeks ago, and her family came to my house, which was weird because normally she would avoid coming, but she came when I wasn't here. And then I live at home, so this is my family's house, same house. And then the next weekend, we saw each other at a mutual family friend's house, and we said hello, but like I ignored her. Like if I'm not good with somebody, I can't pretend like we have a relationship. So I just pretty much ignored her the whole night and conversed with her. It was at her house, the get together. So I went and similarly. So I think what my issue is, like I'm saying, like with the towing of the line between secure and avoidance, I I think that I'm coming from a place where I'm like I did try to assuage the situation first, like try kind of put the fire out and talk about what's going on, and it was very disrespectful. I think disrespect is a
The big need, and then sometimes can touch a little into triggering zone.
exactly, and that's I think how I feel about this whole situation. I think it's really brought out like all my work like at one time, like this whole month. Initially I was like upset about it, but then I slowly got into like it gave me a lot of closure on this, like my ex, the whole family, everything. I was just kind of done. I was like I don't see the value of these people in my life. They're just more work than they're cut out for. I'm cool with seeing you guys on weekends because we're family friends, but I don't think about you during the week, which feels really good from like coming from my anxious states. So now I'm just a little bit like, and then on a macro level, I've just noticed that I'm very deep in my avoidance now, but I'm like really happy with it. I'm really at peace, like especially coming from that anxious side for so many years. So like but I know there's things missing because I'm like exhausted and like energy is depleted. It's one of the reasons why I came back on the webinars. I like attended the one earlier today and now because I'm like, I know there's stuff missing and there's like growth that needs to occur, but I don't really know where to start because like I'm really content with my avoidance. Like I'm really comfortable.
Okay, well, here's what I would say. So, I mean, this is amazing. Great work. It's so nice to see you. I'm glad you're back here. But I would say for sure, it doesn't sound avoidant. It sounds like you have unmet needs that may lead to feeling kind of depleted in different forms. And that may have been triggered from the friendship, but here, like I heard you say a few key things that don't sound avoidant to me.
Okay.
I'm content, and you said it a few times.
Yeah.
It's closure for me with the whole family, all these different things. It was a lot of effort that I was putting in. It's kind of more time than it's worth. Like what I'm hearing is that you were probably putting a lot of emotional energy into those relationships. It's tough too when there's like so many ties for a long time, right? That have like really personal roots for you because it's like, okay, your ex and you're with that person for a long time and then the sister and then you're going to hear and like all these things. And I feel like you kind of like got to have a little bit of a sense of peace. That doesn't mean avoidance. That just means that you're probably not used to not having your attachment style being activated. And sometimes we think it's avoidance at the beginning. But it sounds more to me like this feels like a good boundary for now. maybe open to reconsideration would be a healthy thing if she turns around and speaks back to you.
That's
You
how I
would
feel. Yeah.
exactly. And that's really healthy. That's really healthy. That's
Okay.
like really secure to, like you said, towing the line. Like that's very secure. You tried, you reached out, you like went above and beyond after you saw she blocked you. She didn't respond. Okay. You can't, like, what are you going to keep doing? That's when we start getting into self-betrayal. You've done your part. You've done more than enough. It's secure to actually feel like in acceptance with it right now.
Mhm.
And I would be open to reconsidering if she came back and had a different type of conversation and was willing to work through it. What can you do if she won't even be willing to have a conversation? So I would say that's healthy, secure. I would maintain it. I would definitely do what you are doing as well, which is good. And maybe I'm noticing needs are depleted. Let me intentionally come in, Matt, come into the webinars, like reconnect with other friends, go to meetups, meet new people, like these different things where you can have rewarding friendships that go two ways sort of thing. And in the meantime, hold your boundary. If she wants to participate and change her mind, you can consider it based on what she says and how she communicates to you. But honestly, everything you're doing, I wouldn't call avoidance. I would call it like true security right now.
Okay. Yeah, I think, yeah, that makes sense. I think I'm always worried about the like FA all or nothing that I have. So like,
But it
I'm afraid
wasn't
I'm like,
yeah,
yeah, that's why I can't do.
yeah. If you were like, she blocked me, I'm never speaking to her again. Get away
Yeah.
from me. I'm never going to the, but you're like kind of feeling it out. You were like able to go to the events at the family's house and
Yeah.
still see like what was going to be there without like, it's not in the ball's not in your court. That's just like the simple solution. And so you holding that boundary and then being able to like proceed from there and be open to her if she does try is very secure. All or nothing would be like, even if she tries, I will never let her back in. So huge difference. And yeah, really, really well done, honestly.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Nice to see you. And thank you for sharing.
Thanks.
Okay, we'll do one more last question for the evening. And then Thomas is next. And then Latanya, I hope I'm saying that correctly. Probably not. I hope you're okay with that because everybody mispronounces my name too. Latanya, what a cool name. And Fanula, I will keep my eyes out for you guys tomorrow and Saturday. But Thomas, if you'd like to go ahead.
Okay, yeah. I am. Let's see. Let me make sure here. Can you hear me? Am I good here?
Yeah, really
okay.
clearly.
Okay, all right. I am very, very new to all of this. I actually just found all of your videos on YouTube a couple of weeks ago, and then signed up today. So I kind of got lucky here. But all of this kind of came about, started dating a girl last year, and things were phenomenal and just amazing. And I'm just like, oh my God, how could I get this lucky? So on and so forth. Had no idea any of this stuff was ever even an issue. Both of us had been in very, very abusive relationships prior to meeting. Mine mostly verbal, hers every meaning of the word abusive. And then after we had been together for a while and the commitment started to be there and the vulnerability started to be there, the communication was there, but it wasn't 100%. Like there were little pieces missing. I've realized since I started diving into all of this. And one weekend she's supposed to actually get to stay the whole weekend with me. Ended up sick. I took her Chick-fil-A soup and medicine and took care of her and all this stuff that she'd never gotten before. A couple days later, after she had gotten better, we were talking on the phone, and she's just like, I wasn't expecting this. I wasn't ready for this. I don't know what to do. I wasn't prepared to fall in love with you. And at that point, everything went sideways. Literally a couple of days later, it was a drastic, if I can push him away, I'm going to push him away action. It was something I had never experienced before, never seen before out of anybody in my life, any relationship whatsoever. And so it threw me for a very big loop. I started figuring out that, okay, she reacted because she got really vulnerable, and this was what she thought she had to do to protect herself or whatever. And I made that comment to her. I said, does this sound right? Is this what's going on here? She said, yes, it is. Anyway, that night, after I got to her house, she begged me not to leave her, begged me to stay, didn't want to let me go, like literally did not let me go for a very long time. She wouldn't let go of my arm or my leg or whatever she had hold of at the time. And a few days after that, she was like, I need some time, or she was like, I need some time to think. Got very, very quiet, only responded every now and then. And ended up just kind of like, I don't think we work. She found a couple little nitpicky reasons why things weren't going to work and why it wasn't going to go well or whatever. And she put some of the blame on herself and all this. Anyway, fast forward to after that happened, she blocked me on everything, blocked my number, blocked me on the one social media that I actually have, and went totally silent. And that's when I kind of started to dive into all of the attachment theory stuff, and that kind of helped me figure out part of the problem. And so where I'm at right now is last week? A week before? No, it was 2 weeks ago. I watched your little snippet video on YouTube about like how fearful avoidant type people will, at 3 or 4 weeks, they kind of start feeling their feelings and things kind of start sinking in, all that kind of stuff. Well, I kid you not, almost 3 weeks to the day, I get a phone call. And so it was kind of late at night and I was deep asleep. And by the time that I woke up enough to realize my phone was actually ringing, I had missed her. So I called her back and she didn't answer. I left her just a short voicemail and said, hey, are you okay? Is anything wrong? And then just left it there. Didn't hear anything back. So when I woke up the next morning and got things situated, I just sent her a little text message just to make sure, hey, are you okay? Are the girls okay? One of her daughters has severe food allergies. So I'm just like, okay, if something happened with her oldest and she's sitting at the emergency room by herself, I need to make sure she's okay. So did that, and my message went through. And so I was like, okay, she didn't block me after last night. She left me. And so I'm just like, okay. So a couple of days later, I had an appointment with my therapist and kind of talking through things with him. And he was just like, he said, I think you're safe to reach out again, but just leave it simple. So I sent her a message that night after I got home. And I was just like, I'm still here. I love you. I'm not going anywhere. And that's it. And left it very short, very simple, just kind of a reassuring message. And it went through. I was still unblocked. She got both of those text messages, but she's yet to respond. And so now I'm kind of at a point, because this is also brand new to me, and I know I'm more anxious. I know what to do to be secure, but I'm not there yet. And I don't know kind of, am I taking the right steps? From her perspective, what should I be doing while I'm working on myself, and like all that stuff kind of tying together. And it's the anxious part of me wants to freak out and overdo it, but I'm trying not to. So I'm kind of like, what I'm trying to understand from her perspective at the same time as mine.
I understand. You're trying to understand what will be best received by her, as well as what's the right thing for me as a person.
Yes.
Okay, beautiful. So welcome. Glad that you're here. And really nice that you were able to learn about all this stuff. And sometimes it leads you to these sorts of things, going through challenges, and it's nice that you're proactive and learning and growing through this. I'm sorry to hear, because it's sad. I saw a couple smiling faces oh, I understand, sort of empathizing faces, because those of us who have been FA, which I've been there myself in the past, it's what happens honestly is this really strong dynamic of you want love, and then when you feel really connected, it's terrifying. It's that attachment trauma really shows up, and that's what that was. So the fact that she was in an abusive relationship, and then love again, what it is it becomes a catalyst for all of your sorts of conscious moves. So when you feel that vulnerable again, I'm just going to mute you a little because you have a little bit of feedback, and then I'll unmute you in a second. So what happens is when you have that much vulnerability, well, what are your most recent stored associations around vulnerability? Horrible trauma, right? So that's what's happening is you get that close, you get that attached, whatever wasn't resolved in relationship to attachment is going to come to the surface really, really fast. And this is where you're seeing these strong push pulls, you see her holding on to you and holding on to your arm and then saying it's not going to work out, and these huge polarities. It's just attachment trauma at work. So a couple of things, Thomas. The first thing is, For you, you have to be really careful that you don't self-abandon for too long, to the point where you keep trying for somebody who may not be ready and willing to do the work in response. And then you kind of give all of your energy and time, and it can be really unfair for you long term. So how we solve for that right away is to set a deadline. And we say, okay, obviously you love her. Obviously you care about her. I hear in the way you asked your question, you're not ready to like say, oh, I'm fine, I'm just going to work on closure, and just walk away tomorrow. So what you can do instead is like set a deadline. I would set a deadline of about a month, maybe 6 weeks. And in that period of time, you can do your work to show up and see if there's a way to sort of salvage the relationship, especially because it's kind of rooted in its like innocence and it's rooted in trauma. So I would say step 1 is going to be to choose that deadline. Step 2 is going to be, in the meantime, do the How to Heal from a Breakup course, because what you're going to do is reposition like what needs she was getting and how to meet them in the relationship to yourself, what traits you're attracted to, how to like do some trait integration work. It'll help you speed up the void, the healing of the void that was left by that relationship, which part of the anxious mind will go, but I don't want to get over her yet. I'm not ready. It's not going to stop you. It's not going to make you get over her or move on. It's going to make you not hurt and be able to do anything that you want to do within that deadline period of time from like a more grounded place without that panicky, like activated attachment style part. So that would be your work, is to start with those sort of 2 things. I would definitely do the needs course as well, will be really important for you as an AP, and eventually the emotional mastery course and the AP course. But start with just like heal from a breakup, pick your deadline. Then when it comes to her, a few key things. When you reach out, my first pointer is I wouldn't have said I love you. I would have said I'm here for you. And don't worry about like regret or like all that stuff. It's not going to make a huge astronomical difference one way or another. But I mean, obviously the door is a little open and she's sort of seeing how you're going to show up. What I would do is I would wait for another few days and send a message. Fearful avoidance, when it's like that, no, after they respond well to the middle ground. Anything that's too polarized one way or the other is going to push them away. If you're too loving, they're going to feel avoidant. Because remember, they're kind of considering, they're not sure what they want from the relationship. They're confused. They're kind of in this like funny intermediary space. If you're too loving and too warm, they'll go avoidant. If you're too cold, they'll be like, oh, I feel rejected, fine, and they'll shut off. So it's really like this little middle ground. I'm laughing at it, you're laughing because you're like, I understand this, but it's so true. So it's like the middle ground. So you want to be like supportive, but not too warm, not too cold. So you kind of like, you want to send messages more like, I'm still here. Let me know if you want to chat, or I'm still here. Let me know if you need anything, or hey, how are you? And the other thing I would say too is just to notice in your text message conversations, you're having closed conversations. I would notice a lot of people like not, there's a little difference between saying, hey, how are you? I'm still here for you sort of thing, versus saying, I'm here. What happened? Are you okay? It kind of like, if the person's thinking about responding, it kind of like forces them because they're used to answering a question when the question's asked, right? So by having open dialogue, it sort of pulls up that conversation a little more effectively. So I would say set a deadline, a month or 6 weeks, do the How to Heal from a Breakup course. As a general rule, I would say reach out over text once every like 4 or 5 days for the next 2 or 3 weeks. If you don't see any, coming towards you with that, then I would say, okay, I've reached out a few times. I was super patient. I tried, that's it. You'll probably, my guess would be that there's a pretty good likelihood that she reaches out again. But you sort of want to stay back for a little bit first. And if she reaches out again and you do connect, then you kind of enter into this new stage, which is like slowly reconnecting from that really middle ground. But Thomas, she's going to have to do some healing. Like she's going to have to do some attachment style work, some attachment style reprogramming, because of the fact that, there's so much trauma there for her. And you saw such the swing of polarity. So she's going to have to like, you guys will have to have discussions about needs, and you may have to just lead the way a little bit. If things reconnect and move that direction, you may just have to talk about needs. She's going to have to, sometimes when fearful avoidance leave suddenly as well, haven't expressed their needs and their boundaries, and they didn't know that they had them. And one day they wake up and they're like, oh, these things are missing and I had an unmet need and I never knew about it. So sometimes, usually it's just the fear, the pure fear. And it sounds like that's really what it is for her, like pure fear related to attachment that you were a catalyst for her unresolved past wounds. But there can be these other dynamics that play too. So you'd have to have conversations about boundaries, needs, and you'd have to reset a deadline once you start connecting again. So that you're also really careful to not like do all this work, show up, and then be carrying the relationship, and then she's not, reciprocating, and it becomes unfair to you. But that will be something to check in with and do along the way. So that's what I would do for the next few weeks. And then that's what I would prepare for in the future, but within that deadline framework.
Yeah. So, okay. Yeah. So that does help me a lot. And she has been, ever since her divorce her divorce process started a couple of years ago, she started going to therapy to heal. But we never had the conversation as far as attachment styles. I didn't know this existed, and it never came up with her. So
I would share.
That's something that, that's something that I want to cover, definitely.
Yeah. And sometimes we can do like a lot of conscious work, and it can be good with like new coping mechanisms or new habits or things like that. But honestly, until we dig into like the subconscious attachment traumas, sometimes it can be limited. Like our healing ability can be a little bit limited. So definitely, and because she's going to be FA and you just see it so strongly, FAs usually take to this stuff really well and really quickly and are like, wow, this explains so much. And so it's worth sharing like a video, an article, whatever it is, or just have conversation. And then usually you'll see that start to transform. So keep us posted, and thank you so much for sharing, and welcome. We're glad that you're here.
I will be around often.
Amazing. Good to see. Okay, guys. So thank you all. I am going to pass this along to our post-webinar host here. So for those of you who are new, what we do after the webinar